Okay, I'm going to show you how to do a broken seed stitch, which is what this is, and on even number of pegs flat. And I'm going to be using red and yellow as my colors. And the wonderful thing I see about the stitch is it has a really nice texture to it. It's almost scaled, so that if you wanted to do a scaled patterning in a project, you can do it with this particular stitch work. If you were to do this in a solid color, I don't think it would be as dynamic as doing it in two different colors. I'm going to explain to you what you need to consider when putting two colors together. What is what? So I'm going to tell you straight off, the red color is going to be your knit rows, and the yellow color is going to be your seed stitch rows. And what the red is what's going to get that definition that makes it look like a scale. And the it's like an overlay. It looks like an overlay. So like the red is like an overlay of the yellow. And if you're using a multicolor, you can do the multicolor where the yellow is, which is your seed stitch rows, and then your contrasting color, which could be black or white or a darker color like I've got here. And you can use that as your knit rows. Okay, so why it's called a broken seed stitch is because one row is knit, one row is knit purl, but if you're doing it with an odd number of pegs, you're going to be, the next row's knit, but then you're going to be doing a purl knit, and that creates the rib stitch. So it means it creates the seed stitch. So if you have the seed stitch, consider that you're doing the opposite on the next row when you pick up your seed stitch color, like you would do a seed stitch. So what makes it broken is the knitted rows in between, but that's what creates this beautiful texture. And I'm going to be showing it on the loom, because the way you're going to be doing the coloration pickup is going to be a little different. I'm working on a dragon coat right now, and this is the chest area. So let me show you how this goes. I have already done a couple of rows, as you can see. Okay, and both my colors are on the same side right now, and this is where you're going to take into consideration. I have red, which means I've already done a knitted row, and that's what you're generally going to start off with, is a row of knit. Okay, so after you do your first row of knit with your contrasting color, you're going to go in and you're going to do the seed stitch. So I'm going to start off with a knit, and I'm going to purl and knit all the way across, knit, purl. The great thing with an even number of pegs that it's easy to know what you start with at the end. When you go to pick it up again, you start with what you did begin. It always is going to start with a knit. But if you have an odd number, that's where it'll get a little more tricky. You're going to start with the opposite of what you started with. So I started with a knit purl, which means my next row is going to be a knit purl. And I will explain why that is. Okay, you see I'm finishing with a purl. Well, in order for it to, if you were to do it consistently with a seed stitch, you'd need to start with the opposite. So this was finished with a purl, I'd need to start with a knit. So that's the benefit of using an even number of pegs and using this stitch, is that you can start with what you started with over here, because you end with the opposite. Okay, but if it were, say, a knit, you'd need to start with a purl to do that. So I finished that row of my seed stitch. I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick up the red over here, which means I'm coming back over to the same side I started with. And that's something you're going to need to keep in mind when you're doing the seed stitch, is on the looms, is you're always going to be picking up from the side you had just started from. So I'm just going to knit my way over. And when you see a pattern written, which I'm writing a pattern up right now for my dragon coat, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the row starting from the side that the yarn is going to be on. Okay, so you can see that we're going back and we're doing the same side. You're just going to pick up wherever the color yarn is, so you don't have to cut and reattach that many times, which I don't like cutting and reattaching. It puts all kinds of weird ends on it. Okay, now we see our yarns on the same side again. We're going to pick up our yellow, okay, and then we're going to do the knit purl all the way back over. And this is a 4-row set, okay, and this is technically the 4th row that I'm doing right now, but to show you the full 4 rows, I'll go in and do the 1st row last. So knit and purl all the way over. Okay. And that is basically a 3rd row of, that's the 4th row of the broken seed stitch. This is the 1st row, which is a purl, which is a knit, sorry. So you pick up your red color from the opposite side again, and then you're just going to knit. Okay, and this same 4 rows. So this is technically row 1 here. So row 1 is a knit. Row 2 is your seed stitch. Row 3 is a knit, and row 4 is your seed stitch. But what I wanted to show you is how it starts off. So that when it's on the same side, as you saw, you start off like that, but it always starts back with that first knit row. Okay, and that is how you do the broken seed stitch. And if you see it written, keep in mind that you're going to be picking up from the same, wherever that color is that's next, you're going to be picking it up. So that's something to keep in mind. But this is the broken seed stitch, and as I said, it creates a wonderful texture for a project. If you're wanting to do, say, a mermaid tail, you can use this. If you're wanting to do a dragon thing, a snake, it's really interesting texture. I will post some images of having used the texture in a couple of different colors and everything. But this is the broken seed stitch, and the thing to keep in mind is what makes it broken is the knitted row in between. So if you've done the seed stitch before, you know what needs to come next on the next row. It needs to be opposite of what you finished with. If you finish with a purl, you need to start with a knit. If you finish with a knit, you need to start with a purl and do the knit purl or purl knit. So keep that in mind, and every row in between is your knit. If you want your color that does the outline to be, if you want to do the outline, remember those are the knit rows. And if you want a color that's going to be kind of like the background that shows up, then what you need is those to be the seed stitch rows. So that is how you do a seed stitch with a flat panel on the loom with even number peg.